All right, Strangelings. Today I have a special treat for you. We're diving into the eerie and unexplained, things that go bump in the woods. Yeah, bump in the woods. But not just that, things that might be watching us. We've all seen creepy stories online about people having unsettling encounters in the wilderness. Whether it's something lurking in the trees, strange disappearances, or even unexplained structures appearing and vanishing. The woods hold mysteries we can't always explain. For today's episode, we'll be talking about Watchers, the film that came out last year, and my thoughts on it because it does go hand in hand with the eerie things that happen in the woods. Now, I had an amazing opportunity to promote the movie, watch the movie, and I figured, I want to do a whole podcast on the eeriness of the woods. And I actually had the chance to interview the director, Ishana Shyamalan. She is the daughter of M. Night Shyamalan, and she is like such a sweet person, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for her. So, she also mentioned a little bit about her paranormal experiences and the things that inspired her regarding the Watchers. And I actually will be posting the interview that I did with her in this podcast episode, which I'm excited to share. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. And because we love a good spooky story here, I'm also going to be sharing something from my own past. Kind of. Well, kind of, okay? So, a friend of mine had an eerie experience back in high school that left both of us questioning so many things about this experience. So, starting with the movie The Watchers. And this is going to have some spoilers. So, if you're okay with that, you can stay tuned in this podcast episode, or you can pause. I don't know. I'm going to do some timestamps as well. All right. So, let's talk about what I loved about the film. So, what stood out to me was that the film, seemingly just by looking at the trailer, taps into something very deeply primal, the fear of the unknown in the woods, the fear of getting lost in the woods. I mean, the woods are incredibly terrifying. Like, I would hate that feeling of just feeling like there's no way to turn back, to get back in my vehicle or back to where I started. I can't imagine. My heart goes out to people that get lost in the woods. There are other fears attached to the woods, and whether you believe in the paranormal or not, if you're out in the wilderness, you need to be prepared, not just with supplies like water, extra batteries, and a plan to get back, but also for what else you might encounter. And I don't just mean spirits. I mean bears, mountain lions, the list goes on and on. You get my drift, right? But these are things that remind us we are not on top of the food chain. And those have been things that really cross my mind when I've ever done any hiking trails or camped out in the woods. But now I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what is Watchers about. So here's a description that I found on IMDb. It says, this forest isn't charted on any map. Every car breaks down at its tree line. Mina is no different. She's left stranded. She is forced into the dark woodland only to find a woman shouting, urging Mina to run to a concrete bunker. As the door slams behind her, she could hear the screams at a distance. Mina finds herself in a room with a wall of glass and an electric light that activates at nightfall. When the Watchers come above ground, these creatures emerge to observe their captive humans, and terrible things happen to anyone who doesn't reach the bunker in time. And so, as you can see, if you watch the trailer, you can see glimpses of that. And I thought that was so eerie. It really just grabbed my attention because when I watched it, I was like, what is watching them? What is it? But I did get some, but I did clock a couple of things when watching the trailer that made me think of folklore and things that already exist as we know it. And we're going to get into what the inspiration is. So, one thing that I will say is that Ashana's work is incredible. Like, I watched her work in The Servant, which is on Apple TV Plus. So if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it. I'm dead serious here, okay? But the mood in the show was just eerie and thriller, and it just puts you in that world. I'm a big sucker for aesthetics when it comes to cinematography and film and just like the visual mood board, right? Like I'm gonna call it the visual mood board for the lack of term, but it definitely has like this dark undertones. Not too dark though, because I've seen films where I'm like, oh my God, I can't see what's in front of me because it's so dark. But this film, like with Servant and the Watchers, I could see where she really does shine and where her strengths are, which is creating this aesthetic and this mood with her work. And she kind of touches base on that, so just keep that in mind when I play the clip of the interview with her. This is what she says with slasher film. She said that she had chosen the novel The Watchers by A.M. Shine for her directorial debut because it's genuinely terrifying and masterfully plays with the reader's expectations. She admired how the author blended mystery with a fantastical world, making you question reality, which I'm also a big fan of, which is why I loved The Servant. So for her, adapting it on screen felt like an honor to bring those eerie visuals to life, which I do give her credit for that. She genuinely did. You know what, guys? Right now, I'm like calm and collected. And just so you know, you're going to see in the interview, I'm not cool, calm, and collected. I'm very nervous and I get really excited meeting people. So to meet her and talk to her, I was just at awe because I'm like, oh my God, I love The Servant. I love that she's a female director. I love that, she's also a woman of color. And, just I feel like that is diversity at its finest. And I'm a big sucker for that. But also, she's so sweet. She is so, so sweet. All right, so I'm going to play the interview, okay? I'm going to play the interview. The Watchers. I feel like The Watchers, like when I was watching the trailer, it felt very much like it was loosely inspired by like some urban legends and folklore.
Yes.
Is that, do you,
Can't say too much about
okay,
it,
okay.
but it definitely is inspired by Irish storytelling.
Oh, really?
And yeah, absolutely. And just yeah, the nature of yeah, kind of creature mythology.
Okay,
So,
okay. Another question I had too. So you mentioned that so The Servant and
yes.
also this movie, they're both like horror
Yes.
essentially and thriller.
Yes.
And I love The Servant. I'm like
Oh my
obsessed. I
gosh,
kept telling
cool.
everybody about it, and
Okay,
like I just felt
cool.
like it was so underrated, but it's so
Yeah.
good. And when people watch it, they loved it. But anyway,
Yeah.
so do you have a like passion for horror, or
Yes.
how did this all come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting. I think, like, I always wonder if it's a nature versus nurture thing.
Yeah.
I feel like I was born being drawn to sort of more macabre, kind of like dark
Yeah.
things. I'm just into that. I feel like I'm like a goth at heart.
Oh, I love this.
So yeah, so it's just been something I think I feel the most when I watch things that are steeped
Yeah.
in horror. It's a really wonderful, I think, like way of using human emotion to ground you and like make
Yeah.
you feel more present. And that's always how I feel when I go watch a scary movie.
Oh, I
So,
love that.
Yeah.
You mentioned also like Hayao Miyazaki movies.
Yes, of
Okay,
course.
I'm obsessed.
Me too.
So, like, what's your top favorite? Like, what are your top three?
So
There's so many.
my main fave is Princess Mononoke.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that. Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah,
You're my favorite.
gorgeous, gorgeous. And then I love Spirited Away
Yes.
and Howl's Moving Castle and Castle in the Sky are
Oh my God.
my top
Yes.
four. But they're all, I mean, I think he's just like a magical genius.
He is. He really
Yeah,
is. When
he
he sounds like,
is.
oh my God, it makes sense. Because I
Yeah.
feel like, especially Hayao Miyazaki and anime have
Yes.
such amazing storytelling.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the fact that you reference, I'm like, okay, you know your stuff.
Oh my god, I love animation. I think it's like one of the coolest art forms.
Yes.
I wish I was better at drawing so that I could do that. But yeah, but it's like I think the idea of like bringing that essence into live action cinema is really really cool.
That's so amazing.
Thank you.
So speaking of like horror and like
Yes.
the urban legends of folklore and Hayao Miyazaki, these are like paranormal topics.
Yes.
Are you into the paranormal? Do you believe?
Absolutely. Oh my god, I
Okay.
totally believe.
You do?
I think yeah, absolutely. I think there's just so many kind of unexplainable things that happen in life.
Yeah.
The apartment that I have in Philly, I'm pretty sure is haunted as well.
What?
No, I
Okay.
just, like,
Oh my
feel
God, I love that.
There's just so much kind of spirituality and things that exist in this world that I think it's impossible to believe that we know everything. So
I love
very
that.
open to it.
She is a big believer of the paranormal, and I hope that one day, I don't know, one day, I can have her on this podcast and we can talk more about like what was that experience like? What does she think was haunting it? I think she said it was a man that was haunting her apartment. But I'm curious to see how she handles it. I'm always curious how people handle the paranormal and how do people draw inspiration from that? Like in the last episode I did, I talked to the cast of Presence and hearing her talk about the paranormal and even being a movie about, you know, experiencing a haunting was very interesting to me. So, anyway, let's segue into the woods now, right? Like back into the theme of the woods and what's watching us. So we know that the film of The Watchers is this idea that something is watching you, right? The film taps into something much older, right? Something that is that's something that is buried deep in folklore that has been told for generations, for years, and that is the Fae. And I'm not talking about Tinkerbell or those soft, whimsical fairies we see in pulp culture, even though they are pretty, and I've done a Tinkerbell cosplay before. But I'm talking about the Fae from mythology that is something else entirely, something else more sinister and perhaps dark. So, across many cultures, the Fae aren't just mischievous little beings that play tricks on humans, they are territorial. They protect the land, and if you step into their domain uninvited, they don't just let you go. Legends say that they lure people into the woods, replacing them with something else, a changeling, or even a doppelganger, if you will. These are the replacements will look just like you, sound like you, but they're not you. Meanwhile, the real you, well, can you guess where the real you is kept? You're taken to another lost realm. In old folklore, people believe that the Fae would steal babies or even adults, replacing them with something else. The changeling would look like a person, sound like the person, but I've seen some stories about this. I know when I narrated for something scary, there was a story of this little boy who could not shake the feeling that his baby sister, there was something off about her. The color of her eyes had changed. She seemed more aggressive, and his parents did not believe him. And then all of a sudden, it was just too late. Now, that is obviously a more fictitious urban legend story, but you can definitely check it out over there on Something Scary if you'd like. But it is terrifying. The idea that the person that you know and love is not acting normal. But it makes you all wonder, right? How many people have walked into the forest and never came back? We know that there are so many podcasts out there. I'm going to give a shout out to Locations Unknown because they do, unlike me, they do a whole series of episodes, and each episode is based on people who have gone missing and why do they go missing. And they are very much specialists. I will say more like their specialty is the outdoors and hiking. And to hear just their thought process on why they went missing. But the ones that always stick with me are the ones that they cannot explain because they try to have a very logical mind and very skeptical mind. They don't jump into the supernatural woo woo like perhaps we do sometimes on here, which is, you know what, fine with me, honestly, because I've experienced paranormal phenomenon. But with them, they do this deep dive and it sticks with me, right? It just makes my skin, oh my God, I just get goosebumps. Let's put it that way. And that's exactly what makes the woods such a perfect setting for horror and stories. Now, I've seen videos on the internet about mimics and other things of that nature, and I've even shared my personal experience with mimics and what I've thought it is. But that's a whole different video in itself, and I just want you guys to consider that when you watch films like The Watchers or any other scary psychological films that just make you think about what could be out there in the woods. So, but aside from changelings and shapeshifters, one of the other things that was also going viral on the internet was the fear of these portals or the fear of running into a fairy circle. And you're probably wondering, what is a fairy circle? That's a great question. I will explain it, but I'm also going to show you a clip of this woman talking about her experience.
I found something really weird outside my house.
So someone definitely had to have made this, right? Because sticks don't just fall down like that. Like, it looks like a little house or something. And so I'm just wondering who was on our property to build this and like why.
So a woman on TikTok claimed to see a mysterious house on her property, and people in the comment sections were just sounding off like, don't touch it, don't go near it, da da da. There's all kinds of things. So she ended up doing an update.
So I have a crazy update for you. If you guys saw my video about the little structure that was on my property that obviously a person had to have built, it wasn't like an animal or anything. I was definitely afraid to even go near it. My husband was like, I don't believe in this. So he just went over and he kicked it down, knocked it over, threw it away. And after that, I was definitely on edge. And our power went out for 48 hours after that. And my husband's car stopped working after that. So It was all just so weird. Genuinely, I don't know if it even has any correlation, but isn't it weird that it happened back to back?
Now, if you spent time on folklore, TikTok, or just these urban legends, you might have heard about the fairy rings, right? There are these eerie circles of mushrooms that seem to appear out of nowhere.
And if you see this, run. Fairy rings are naturally occurring in nature. It usually means that otherworldly spirits or fairies are present.
But it doesn't just stop at fairy rings. There's also this whole algorithm of fae traps.
Look at me this time, you very obvious fae trap doorway to nothing.
First of all, if I have ever seen a fae trap, that's definitely one.
They fascinated and terrified people for centuries, I would say, with many cultures believing that they're tied to the supernatural. Some call them the sorcerer's rings or witch's rings, while others believe they're signs of a hidden world just beyond our own. In European folklore, these rings were often seen as gateways to the Fae realm. Oh, I see I had it on my script. Stories warn that stepping inside one could have dire consequences. Some say you'll become trapped, invisible to the human world. Other peoples claim that once you enter, you're forced to dance with the Fae, spinning in circles until you collapse from exhaustion or even death. In some tales, if you accidentally break the pattern of the ring, well, something else might take a notice of you and will take you. There are even rules about how to safely navigate a fairy ring. Some say you have to walk around the edge exactly 9 times, no more nor less. If you go around it 10 times, misfortune will follow. Others believe that if you step inside on a full moon, you might hear the fairies laughing beneath your feet, just below the surface of the earth. So if you ever come across one, just be very careful. So now that we talked about all of these things, let's talk about my friend's eerie story that I'm genuinely curious to get your thoughts on. While the story didn't happen directly to me, she did tell me the story, and we did try to look for it many of times, and even times when I was not with her. So this was back in high school, and I want to say her and I had like a slight age difference. Well, we did have an age difference. I was in 11th grade, and I believe she was in 9th grade when this happened. So she was dating a friend of mine, and around this time, it was like towards the end of summer, or it was towards the, well, this was getting into, I want to say, into summer break. So I believe like either school had just ended or it was about to end. But the music festival was something that would launch the summer, basically. And because there were so many people there and the gathering would happen at this park, the park, by the way, the park where this was being held at was near this other spooky place called Hell's Tunnel, which I can do a whole story time on that. But it is said that this tunnel is haunted, and if you go past the tunnel, there is this abandoned house that is no longer there. And anyway, the point is that it's haunted. There's a haunted abandoned house that used to be there, but you can cut through the woods and you can cut through different pathways to get to maybe like a neighborhood or another place or bypass traffic, because like the entrance to the park, like you can get basically like trapped with traffic in there if you're trying to all get out of there. So there was this music festival going on, and we also had curfew back in the day. So they were trying to make it home in a timely manner. So the boyfriend is trying to walk my friend on a timely manner home and then head to his house. So what better way to get home is obviously cutting through the woods and a pathway to get to her house and his house faster. When they were walking through this trail, they noticed that getting closer to this eerie house in the middle of nowhere, which by the way, they probably shouldn't be there. But let me like pause here for a second, because the house, I want you to have a visual of this house. This house was just like by itself in the middle of the woods, past the tunnel, and it was a worn down house with boarded up windows with wood, and you're not allowed to go in there. And it was also considered unsafe. But when I would go through this area, I would notice that there was really nothing near this area. It was just this house and also perhaps the children's graveyard behind it. There's also a cemetery for children in the nearby area, which not many people knew about either. And they noticed that there was these small little houses there, almost like it was meant for really small people, maybe like the size of your Barbie doll or a gnome or something like that. And they obviously felt like they should not go near it. But my friend was just very taken back by that. She's like, I've gone through these woods before. I've gone through these pathways before on these trails with my friends, including herself, and never seen these small, little, tiny houses. There were some by the tree, there were some next to each other. And it just felt like it was this little town of small people that were just building up a little house there that's never been there before. Now, this is back in the early 2000s, so it wasn't like they had phones like they do today to snap pictures or anything like that. So she then told me the next day, like, Steph, I found these little houses, these little miniature houses in the woods going towards Hell's Tunnel. I'm like, no way. So I was like, I really need to check it out. And we ended up going, and there just wasn't these tiny homes there. Now I asked her, I said, are you sure it's here? Are you sure it's in this area? And she goes, yeah, I mean, I don't know where else we could have gone, but we definitely came to this park. We definitely were here when the music was playing, and we kept walking because we are trying to get to shortcuts to get to the house faster and bypass curfew. And the houses were not there. Now I've gone several times since then, and the houses just, we've never found these houses, and she's never found these houses. And it just makes me think of all the videos that I've seen on the internet, on TikTok particularly. And I always wonder, what are these tiny little homes and why did they disappear? And how could they disappear in such a very fast, and how could they disappear in such a fast, timely manner? And one thing that I've always thought about is just if this was a prank or if this was make believe, I believe by now she probably would have said something. And that's something that will stick with me forever. So that wraps the question. What is lurking in those woods? Could it just be pure imagination? Could it have been somebody who just ran deep in the woods on the music festival night and just set up mini houses for some reason? But if so, why would they set up these mini little houses? What would be the point of that? I don't know. Something for you guys to ponder about. Are you afraid of things that are lurking in the woods? Aside from your bears and mountain lions and so on, right? Like in terms of supernatural stuff, are you afraid of the unknown or what's out there? Do you think that there is some weight and fact or evidence of the fae or something like that lurking in the woods? I would love for you to tell me. Please message me. Please email me. You know, you can also join my Discord. But maybe this is all just a myth, right? Maybe I'm asking all these questions and it could all just be a myth. Maybe it's just the tricks of our minds when we're alone in nature. These stories continue to be told for a reason. Maybe they're existing for a reason. Maybe some things don't want to be seen, but they want to see us, and they do see us. And if you ever find yourself deep in the woods and you see something unusual, a person, a structure, a sound that shouldn't be there, maybe it's best to just keep walking. Maybe don't look too closely because something out there might be looking right back at you. So until next time, you guys, stay strange.